Hi, I'm just coming today, 22nd of December 2015, as passing comment as a SMMP, social media MP. Um, and as I've said before, I suggest others do this so that they can put their ideas forward for certain issues we may have in our own country or in the world. Um, and so that the politicians and the media might bring them to the fore and the politicians utilise ideas. Um, but they were saying on the radio today about the great costs that people that were going into the A&E, accident and emergency in the hospitals in England, and the costs that this was incurring on the health system, and how it's increased, I think, even 50% since last year. And I think it's a case that we have to start being rather more tough with the public generally, and be the benefit claimants or people that might be working and doing this sort of thing, because we tend to take for granted that we have free education, certainly up to 16. I know college educations are not free, but maybe that's good because it's not abused so much. But the situation is, we go to A&E, because it's supposed to be for when you've had an accident or it's an emergency, that happen, not self-inflicted. Now we're having people taking drugs, either at parties and, having sudden unexpected emergencies there, and that's self-inflicted. We have people who are overweight, incredibly overweight, and that's self-inflicted as well. And obviously with the people getting drunk, that's certainly self-inflicted. And there has to be some degree of responsibility in the cost of these, that if you're going to go and do these things that you are choosing to do, which is you're doing foolish things, really. I mean, I am aware that some young people actually take what they call shots, in order, and drink before they go out, in order that they're half drunk before they go out, so it doesn't cost them so much money, I presume. And then they get paralytic and ill on the streets, collapsing on the streets, and women get raped when they don't know what they're doing, and then there's some dispute of whether it's a rape or it's a consent. So I think with all these issues, we have to start thinking that perhaps if somebody is taken in for being drunk, and depending on maybe how many days they're in there for and what is incurred, but I think there should be, the first time, a £500 fine. The second time, if it happens, it's 1,000 fine, and the third time it happens, it's 1,500 fine. If it goes beyond that, then they will get a penalty on their driving license, even if they are young and haven't got a driving license yet, that it is there pending. And maybe when they reach the age of driving, if they can prove that they haven't been in trouble drinking in this manner since these fines that they've had, then they may be removed before, so it doesn't hinder their ability to get a driving license. Because it's people don't realize how much it costs, I think, each time we go to have an operation or have go into A&E. And I think people should be aware of it. It's a bit like myself. I didn't know a drug I was having. When I heard I think it was £600 a bottle or something like that, and I was horrified. I mean, it's something I had to have, otherwise I couldn't eat. I couldn't swallow. So I, tried very hard to get onto the smallest tablets that I was able to do on those particular ones, because I couldn't crush these. And obviously that's much cheaper. So, I think maybe it should be a good idea if we publicise how much it costs the NHS for each person that goes in there for a couple of hours or for a day or for overnight. And perhaps think about instituting fines along these lines. Even for people who are overweight, that this NHS is bearing the brunt of this, either with the operations or with the other health issues that occur due to being overweight, diabetes and that sort of thing. I think it's a case that if somebody is becoming overweight, they should be under the doctor, and if they've gone over maybe a stone or 2 stone over what is their recommended weight, I think it should be compulsory that they attend weight loss classes, and also that if they go beyond the maybe 2 stone over what is their basic weight, and then they can go over to 3 stone and more, that once they realize that once they go up to 3 stone more than their body weight, then they will start having benefit cuts if they're on benefit, which usually they are, I think, because they're getting too overweight to be able to work and this sort of thing. Now, if they're not on benefit and it's due and they're working, then perhaps there should be some penalty or some cost that they need to pay due to that, unless of course there is some medical reason why they're overweight and they can't control it. But a lot of these issues are due to lack of self-discipline, and I think our society is becoming very lax, and it's all very kind and we mustn't upset people or offend people, but we've gone too far in the opposite direction, and the whole system is being abused, and the whole system will collapse if we don't bring some sort of order to it. And even with regard to drugs as well, perhaps there should be something along those lines with a penalty if they are taken into hospital, be it for heroin or some other such thing, although I realise you have to get people off heroin once they're addicted. It's difficult, so that needs a little bit more thought. And with regard to benefit claimants anyway, be they English or immigrants, this issue where we have, as I say, there was an immigrant Syrian family that came into Wales, was housed with 7 children, and there are other benefit claimants that are English that have children, large families, and even though they're on benefit, they seem to be falling pregnant and having another child even though they're on benefit. Now, there has to be some common sense again. In the 60s and 70s, I think it was a case if you couldn't afford a child, you didn't have a child. And now it's a case that people expect benefits and expect to live a life, on par with somebody who's on quite a good salary, and sometimes better than those on a salary. And those that are working quite often don't have children because they have more sense of responsibility because they're working for it, and yet have another child. And even if you're on tax credits or similar, why have another child if you can't afford it? If you're on tax credits, you're on a very tight budget, and to have another child is going to make it very difficult. It may be not ideal, and we want children maybe, but sometimes we have to deny ourselves these things. I was brought up on a farm. I saw calves and lambs being sold to market to be eaten. Sometimes your mind has to accept these things even though your heart doesn't agree with it. It's like my mother was ill for 6 months, dreadfully ill, and at the end of the day you think it's better for them if they do die because they're suffering, and your heart doesn't rule your head has to rule your heart. So I think we have to start thinking along these lines in society, and perhaps even due to this fact that society in Europe in particular is now bringing in a massive influx of immigrants, be they refugees or otherwise, that have large families, 4 or 5 children, and our benefit system won't carry all these families, particularly when most of these families, as do some evangelical type families, believers, they believe that to have many children is a blessing, but even if they can't afford them. So I think we're going to have to counteract that, and maybe even I think it's been introduced that you can only get benefit for up to 2 children now, which I think is good. But I think there may even need to be something along the lines that families are restricted, particularly now that we're 60 million here, destined to be 70 million, even just on the basis of the general influx of immigration. And we've only got so much landmass here, and if Scotland decides to break away from England at some point, we're going to have even less. Perhaps there should be some thoughts along the lines of China, that we start restricting the birth rate in this country. And I can't understand why we keep hearing from politicians that we need to more immigrants in order to support um, the elderly that we have here, or to bring in more talent. I mean, we must have talent enough with 60 million. And I think in the process of time we must restrict the immigration along the lines of America and Australia, where people only come if they've got a job. And in Australia, even if you go over there, even if you go on a 3-month tourist, or I think it's tourist or working visa, you have to have £2,000 or dollars in your account before you go over there. And I think we may have to start introducing something like that for immigrants. I think we may even have to start thinking of bringing the changing the status of asylum, because that is being abused. Asylum 30 years ago was maybe 1 or 2 or 6 a year, political asylum seekers who were being attacked or sought to be killed in their country due to their making a stand in their country for freedom or democracy. Now we have anybody kind of seems to be able to claim asylum status, and that can't work. It's everything is too much out of control, and perhaps we need to start thinking about, if we do decide to come out of Europe, maybe thinking along the lines, what will happen to us with Europe, and perhaps even as Spain is changing its democratic parties, and they're saying that they don't want to have, Europe taking over their sovereignty. These new parties that have come in. Perhaps it's a case that if we come out, others will also want to come out, and we have a more loosely aligned Europe, which is just an interaction, an agreement on the economies we have, and perhaps trading and this sort of thing, and maybe a fairly loose arrangement that people come and work if they've got a job. If they've got a job in a particular country, they can come and stay, but they can't have permanent residency. They have to go back to their country, and even their children as well. They are residents of those born to the parents and based in that country they come from. They don't have residency here because they were born here. With regard to the lorry drivers in Calais, where I hear some are being threatened with machetes, and it's getting quite aggressive. Now, these people are not necessarily refugees or immigrants that are going to bring benefits. They're going to bring to the society. They're going to bring crime, because they're not going to find the jobs necessarily or the homes, because we have difficulty enough as it is. So I think there must be some means where the English and the French should perhaps make a sweep through the camp, as I think they did a couple of years ago, and it was agreed some were allowed to come and some, were dispersed in France. But there's a sweep to go through to find who has got weapons, and that they're brought and charged and somehow deported. Now, I know this is a big problem, because even if here, once somebody is in England, even though they've been told they must leave the country, by the time the date comes when they leave the country, they just disappear and they're still in the country, and then it costs the taxpayer here to either follow them up or just find out where they are, or even. And the thing is, if they destroy their documents, we don't know where they come from and where do you send them back to. And then if that country doesn't accept them back, then what do? We're stuck with them. So, and it's the case if you get a mass of people arriving at the borders of your country, what can you do? So this is quite a difficult situation, really. I'm not quite sure what to do about that. I don't know what the government is doing at the moment. I wish I did. But I think certainly the public in general, all of us, we need to be more responsible for our actions and be aware that the benefit system we have had has been very good and we've abused it. And we are going to pay the price for it if we don't start being more reasonable and realize that it's a benefit to as a net to catch us while we're in difficulty, while we find our feet again. And we need to, it's not something to start living the life of Riley on while you're on it. It's a time to start, trying to save, trying to get things back together again, and not to have more children, not to go out drinking and smoking and having pets and that sort of thing, which you can't afford on benefits. It's a luxury. These things are luxuries. So I just ask that we all start thinking more clearly along these lines and think with our head more often rather than our heart.